Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome our media partners. We have Brian Kelly from the Sioux Star, Dan Gray from Sioux Online, and James Hopkin from Sioux Today. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we do our roll call, I'd like to do our acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Garden River and Batchewana First Nations, as well as the Métis peoples. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We are missing Ian McKenzie. I am here myself, Lisa Vezo-Allen, John Bruno, Rick Webb is online with us. Matt Shoemaker is here. And we have Chief Stevenson with us. The Deputy Chief is online, and we have Sarah Miles, as well as our guests. We have Lisa Hodgkin and Lincoln Ludick and Ben Baldock. I was having a moment. Okay, and Brett Duguay. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 1:02 p.m. Before getting started, do we have any conflicts of interest declarations? Seeing none. Are there any questions or information arising out of the minutes and not otherwise on the agenda from our February meeting or from this meeting? No? Okay. I need a mover and a seconder for the adoptions of the minutes of February 24th, 2022. John Bruno will move, seconded by Mr. Shoemaker. All in favor? Thank you. Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting as presented are approved. Motion to accept the agenda for today, March 31st, 2022. Mover?
Lisa?
Rick? Seconder? John? Resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting as presented be approved. All in favor? Wonderful. Chief, number 8, I will take it over to you.
Okay, we'll start off on your tab 8 alpha. We're going to deal with the board account ledger. Only change to that was the bursaries that we approved at the last meeting. And you can see 28th of February, Sioux College bursaries awards, 1,500. And I see 28th of February, legal costs an investigation, 1,502.
And I also want to say the Sioux College recipients did send us some very nice thank you letters, so that's very appreciated.
Good, thank you, Madam Chair. If we go now to the next, which we're going to look at the 2022 monthly overtime for your comparison. And up on your screen, you can see between January and February of 2022. January, we were at 98,000. February, we're 83,000. And part of the reason for that in this particular assessment of the overtime and the others that come following this, we had a homicide investigation on second line that is still ongoing. And we've had several overdoses, as well as the bridge protests that accounted for significant overtime during the Freedom Alliance movement. So that accounts for, I mean, even though we're down from 98 from January, it's still sort of significant compared to this time last year, which was 48. If we go to the next slide, again, you can see between January and February, if we look at staff shortage overtime costs, we went from 3,308 in January to 5,302. It is consistent with last year this time at 5,000. And again, those are related to the two biggest issues, which was the homicide and the bridge costs. On the next slide, you can see, which is simply civilian staff. Again, we went from 3,308 to 5,000. The next slide is overtime in relation to court, and we haven't had this slide simply due to the cyber attack. So you can see that we have an increase, obviously, in our year-to-date of overtime at court, and that's simply due to the fact that we now put officers in a courtroom. COVID last year, we didn't have officers attending. So you're going to see those little bit offsets when we compare year-to-date, because last year, hopefully, will be an anomaly.
Does anyone have any questions for the chief? Okay.
So the next package is rather extensive, and instead of taking you through monthly reports from July year-to-date and cumulative, I'm going to go to December of the last month year-to-date, which gives you a more robust overview of the data. So I'll let Lincoln get you there on the screen. And this is actually very similar to a year report. The difference being that some stuff has to still be put into the database that's awaiting entry, but it is, I would say, very accurate as to our calls for service in the different categories. So we'll start off with our calls for service. Reportable calls for service are up between 21 and 2020 by 5.9% in reportable. Overall total, including non-reportable, are up by 6.1%, which is really not significant in the sense of the number of from 32,001 to 34,000. Crimes of violence, we went from 2 homicides in 20 to 4 in 21. Robberies are up from 81 to 111, so we have increases there of 37%. Our assaults and sex assaults are both down respectively from 11 and 20%. Good news in terms of crimes of property. Overall, break and enter totals are down 6% between 20 and 21. Businesses were down the most from 195 to 103, or 47%.
I did have a question about that, Chief, with the businesses. So with because that is quite the decrease. Do you think it was a combination of businesses not being open, but also with having the dynamic patrols in the downtown, plus with the private security service of the Downtown Association? Like, do we have sort of an understanding as to why? I mean, it's a good problem to have.
I would suggest to you it's all three of those, but to definitively say which one is more or less, I would suggest less businesses open potentially. Definitely the downtown patrol, more visibility of police, and potentially security as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my assumption. It's always good when you see decreases are great, but also it's a great learning tool as to what's working and what isn't working. So I think that sort of is a very good indicator that the dynamic patrols and the private patrols were, definitely
good use of money.
Very good use of, yes, thank you.
And that's consistent with theft of motor vehicles as well. We're down 22% from 209 to 163 in attempts as well. We see shoplifting, however, went up from 307 to 704. And that, I would suggest, has more to do with people that steal in this community is more out of need than out of necessary criminality per se, whether it's grocery stores and or property type alcohol that they can sell and change into other.
Well, I think with people not being able to access the CERB, that's probably made an impact. And I know there's been a big strain on food banks and food related services. So I don't know if we could send out like a general communication just about general loss prevention methods for retailers, or if that's.
We can always do that. I mean, we have a very, and I can ask Lincoln on the website, we have great crime prevention tips there that they can go to. We can certainly raise that awareness to the material that's on the website and say, you know what, it's good, generally speaking, if you haven't taken a look at our website lately, take a peek and you'll see a variety of different CPTED issues, as well as just common sense crime prevention strategies to, assist with that reduction. Absolutely.
Definitely. Thanks.
Sudden deaths down 3.4%, which is not significant. Motor vehicle collisions down 12%. Could be due to the fact less cars on the road. Impaired driving down 53%, less bars open, less people on the road potentially. Bail violations are consistently a problem, up 21%. And several communities are now publishing in their local paper the Bill C-75 concerns. I believe Sarnia was the last in a variety of different communities. So that's primarily the overall picture of our crime stats for the year. Any questions, concerns, suggestions?
Rick, Matt, John, anything further? Nope. Okay, thank you.
So we'll move on to State Golf, which is a board report on the complaints. And we've had 2 new complaints in February of 2022. OIRPD received a complaint relating to the customer service of the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service. They could not proceed as it was not police officer based. It was more civilian. We investigated it internally and found that there was no misconduct on the part of the civilian employee, so the file is closed. So anytime we get those complaints, we don't simply leave them. We investigate it internally as well to make sure we can improve our customer service. The second is ongoing, as you can see, related to a complaint about a lack of investigation. In 2021, at this time, we had 8. This year, we're up to 10.
Before we move that off that, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Do the frontline staff who are not officers, do they get customer service training before they're dispatched to their role?
Oh, absolutely. There's a number of quality controls. Not only is it on hiring, and not only is it during their probationary period where they're assessed and watched, but also Ben instituted a program in the organization about 6 months ago in terms of quality control, where we check all of our comm center communications sporadically. And if we find one, then we look into it. And there's also the awareness in the organization that we're always watching and listening for that. There's also a telecom sergeant during the day that overhears these communications as well. So we have a number of different checks and balances to make sure that that level of service is maintained.
Okay, good.
But excellent question, thank you.
And Chief, the dispatcher as well, that area?
That's a specific
That's a
area.
specific area.
Yeah.
Okay.
We move on to use of force. I'd like to thank Lisa for putting together the nice table that sort of shows you the numbers. So what this allows you to do is sort of track through the year the number of occurrences per month and sort of compare it to the last. So we went from 3 in January to 13 in February. The number of firearms pointed 2 to 5. The number of firearms drawn 7. Conducted energy weapon in the second column from 1 till 10. And if you look through majority of these occurrences, you'll see that 80% of them are usually related to domestic incidents that we're dispatched to. A couple of them were people carrying firearms and edged weapons, but a lot of them are simply domestic incidents that we know are very dangerous incidents for officers to attend. And I'll let you read through each one of them as you pursue. The travel log is pretty straightforward. Under Inspector Bolduc went for a swearing in that I was to attend. I couldn't. I was at the board meeting last month in Timmins, and the rest are courses that are part of regulations for our people to be trained in. Notes of appreciation, 8 Fox, 8 Juliet, 2 notes of appreciation. And in February this year, a phone call, the on-duty sergeant from a person from Nova Scotia thanking for our assistance on a sudden death call. Sergeant Doucette was the member that went above and beyond in his assistance with the family of the deceased. He went out and purchased food for the family, following day, got to the apartment to check on them, brought them non-perishable food items to get them through until the family from Nova Scotia could attend. Just love to see those things happen in our community. Also in February, at the International Bridge, they were thanking us for our attendance there. As you know, we had 2 cars there at all times. Our goal is to make sure that that bridge was protected, and thanks to Deputy McLaughlin and his team putting a wonderful SMEAC together. He had cooperation from the International Bridge Authorities, from the Americans, from the CBSA to the OPP, and intelligence briefings every day. And they all did a wonderful job. So that should be extended to the operational side of the house.
I also want to mention that we received, and thanks Lisa for forwarding it, a lovely email. Chief, thanks for attending the Celebration of India dinner on March 20th. And it definitely was noted that you were a very welcome guest, and they were really happy to have you there. And thanks for taking the time to do that, and really important to connect with all members of our community. So we appreciate you taking your time to do that.
I had an absolutely wonderful evening as well. So
I had my son's 19th birthday party that day, so
I look forward to the next one.
yeah. Thank you
Madam
for
Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to say too, just in follow up to the previous discussion the chief had, I just wanted to comment. I thought the service did a wonderful job on managing the protests at the bridge and whatnot. It was, a lot of people commented on how well that was managed and noticed the presence of the service. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that myself. I thought it was a great job. Thank you.
Definitely, Rick. Thank you so much.
So now we're going to go in. There's 3 reports, and for Councillor Shoemaker, every year we have under statute, we do our training academy does up a review of 3 specific areas. It gives you an overview as per the requirements of the Police Services Act. So the first one's going to be search of persons annual report. And what I do, instead of obviously going through 5 or 6 pages, I take you to the more or less the stats here that sort of shows the comparators between the different years. So in 2020, we had 1,224 arrests, 9 strip searches. We had 1,461 arrests this year and 23 strip searches. So we are required by legislation to identify the scenarios. So out of that, there was 16 males, 7 females, and 21. Out of that, the racialized groups were 18 white and 3 Indigenous. And the reason for the search was primarily, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, search for drugs and weapons. That's 20 of the 23. Any comments, questions?
The one thing I didn't see in here, Chief, through you, Madam Chair, is, or maybe I just missed it. Are the searches always done by an officer of the same gender as the person who's being searched?
We would want that to occur, yes.
So if you want, sir, our policy indicates that there'll be no strip search conducted on roadside. So we do strip searches in the building under controlled environment, and a same gender officer is made available. So in our policy, obviously, if there was a weapons call on the road and a male officer had to search a female officer, or vice versa, that would not be a strip search. It would be called a field frisk to make sure they couldn't access weapons. Right. Strip searches, typically what you're seeing here, are being done in our building in a controlled environment with a same gender officer as the person being searched.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So from a statutory perspective, they follow the constitutional standards set out in R versus Golden. My eyes seem to catch that out of the blue. I don't know.
There you go.
There's the authority, but the next one is the collection of identifying information in certain circumstances report. And this is where you recall new legislation came in 2021 where street checks became a formalized issue. Yep. Where when we ask for people's identity, then we have to complete these forms as to the socio-demographic variables associated to them. And in this case, there were no street checks as per the legislation conducted by the service of 2021. And if you find that a little bit bizarre, if you go to the back of the report, you'll see that we are not alone in that Toronto Police Service had 1 in 2018, 3 in 19. York had 1 in 20, and Peel had no reported interactions. So we're not inconsistent with the rest of
Do you
the
wanna-
legislation.
Just for the media, do you want to explain what a street check is in layman's terms?
So a street check is where we stop someone on the street that are not related to a criminal investigation, and we ask them for identifying characteristics. What's your name? Where are you going? What are you doing? In the old world, prior to the legislation, you could do that, you would record it, and you would move on. Today, now it has to be a whole process with documentation filled out. Now,
This is called carding.
yeah, and carding. But today now we have, when we drive by a residence and we see a piece of property or a person, but we don't ask them their name, we can take that information and put that into the system. But it doesn't kick into the legislation because we haven't tried to identify them. That's the difference. So as soon as you attempt to identify, that's when the carding legislation kicks in.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions, Rick? No?
Use of force. Oops, sorry.
Oh. Nope, okay.
Use of force. On our use of force report, again, we'll take you to the quantitative data, and you can see on the first bar here, we do a percentage of use of force versus the total calls for service, and we're at 0.0034%, up from 0.025, which really isn't significant in the big picture. If we move to the back of the report where we have more data, it shows the scenarios. And you will see that all use of force between the 2 years is up. We went from 2020, 1 firearm discharge to 7. The 7 would be related to the police investigation and shooting on Pine Street. Firearms pointed would also be increased by that incident, drawn as well. And we do draw firearms for dispatching animals and whatnot as well. You can also see the big one here is 733 empty hands soft went from 3 to 25, CEW from 7 to 18, deployed and displayed conducted energy weapon from 37 to 63. Those are scenarios that you saw back in the use of force reports, where we're simply utilizing our use of force options as per the legislation to protect our member and members of the public.
Any questions for the chief? Okay.
One thing I wanted to draw attention that's of interest is the naloxone
Yeah, I was,
at the end. It's funny you
Yeah.
picked that up.
Yeah.
So in naloxone spray that's used to offset the effects of an opioid poisoning has also increased significantly. You can see we had 14 and 21 uses of it and 3 and 20. And so I would see that trend continuing. I've had the radio on. I remember there was one gentleman that we put 4 into him, and that brought him back to life. And that was on a bicycle patrol where they happened to be going along and they looked down and they saw him and they saved his life. And so I see that happening more often than not. It's a good thing because we're there in a lot of places where maybe the general public isn't, that we can save lives. So.
well, and I think for all community organizations, they can receive free kits from the Canadian Mental Health Association. We certainly have them at Grocer for Good, and last summer our summer student administered and saved 2 people on Gore Street, and
Awesome.
so it's very much. I really recommend that all businesses should have it, and it's free. So it's very easy to do and easy to access. So it's all of us working together, right? And definitely, I knew about the bike patrol, and I think that was a right place at right time, and
Yeah.
that person was very lucky. Thanks, Chief.
Okay. Section 12, I
The
believe.
donation requests.
So I believe, Sarah, this is where the board needs approval. I think it was asked of us last time to bring this forward with a new form that can be filled out online, and this can be for any members of the public can access our website and ask for a donation from the board. Then it's consistent in a process, and I'll leave it over to you.
Sure. I just have a couple of edits, and only because of, you know, my voluntary life and filling out a lot of these forms. I think it would be on the form that we should put a minimum and a maximum so that there is a dollar amount. I think that's really helpful for organizations so they know. And I would just put an example. So I think I'd put under number 2, the donation sponsorship shall support or promote the goals and objectives of the police services and shall not cause priorities of the police services to be compromised, and just put in brackets example, supporting scholarships, or we're gonna, you know what I mean, like have some examples of what we support, like what we're willing to support. That really is helpful for organizations knowing, hey, we're not going to support your fundraising event, but we'd support you doing an education piece or something like that, so that it's a little more clear as to what we will fund and not fund. That's helpful. Otherwise, Sarah's going to get bombarded with lots, I think, of applications, and they might not be relevant. So that can kind of help to weed out some organizations that might be looking for funds that really don't align with the priorities. Rick, did you have any feedback on the form?
No, I thought it was fine. I'm fine with the recommended changes, so they're good ideas. But I thought it was good, and I thought it'll help us going forward.
Yeah, it's nice and clear and simple. Matt?
Yeah, I had mentioned this at the last meeting. The form itself, I don't see anything wrong with. And your changes are fine. It's, I think the issue of donating these funds, which I understand are from the police auction, correct?
Yes.
Seems to me that since this is, these are public funds, that they should go to the police services needs. So they should probably be used for one-time purchases that the police service needs, as opposed to being donated out. The city doesn't donate money, and I don't think on a more basic level than this form that the police services should be donating money either. And I have the same issue with PUC donating money. They're public entities. These are public dollars, and they should be put to a public purpose, none of which is served by donating them to events.
Well, a lot of organizations such as PUC, banks have social funds that they use. So we can definitely earmark, there's a maximum. So, I mean, historically, it's been the scholarships, Easter seals, things like that. So, I think when you take a look at, what is our social purpose, and a lot of organizations will have, a set amount for things outside of our jurisdiction, but that support what we're trying to do. Rick, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I disagree with that comment. I think we're a community organization, community policing, and as a community organization, the things that we've been supporting are for the good of the community. And I think it's good that the police service is involved. A lot of the members of the service themselves have been involved with a lot of these charitable events. And so it's our way of also supporting those officers when they're involved in some of these philanthropic activities. So, my view is, I think it's not only important, I really think it's necessary that we show that we're supportive of community activities, and that the members of the service, they're involved. I think us pulling back our support would send the wrong message. And the other thing is, the amounts that we give are not extravagant. They're modest, but I think it shows that we're behind them. And so those would be my comments.
Thanks, Rick. John, do you have anything to add?
Just going back in history a little bit, we were entertaining a lot of these requests in the past, and what I found was that there were just a few. I think by putting the form on, my only concern, and I like that you put the minimum and maximum, because it would attract a ton of applications. So we would be increasing more so, and I think we struggle with, do we? I think the question that Matt has put forward, we did struggle with that question way back as well. And so I think if there's a compromise here with regard to, trying to limit the amounts of requests that we get with what you mentioned with the maximum, minimum, and so on, I'm just fearful that everyone will, and then it's hard to decide which one do you give, because that was our struggle. Our struggle was, do we give it to everybody or do we not give it to everybody? And I think that was our concern. So.
Well, I think if we're very clear on the form, what we will and what we won't fund, that will really assist people applying, as well as putting that minimum and maximum. And I think it's important that we are really transparent and open with the fact that we do support community initiatives. I can recall, in collaboration with Tim Hortons, you did Bikes for Kids, all those things in the past, which I think, we can see a lot of good things happening. I know the Breakfast for Kids program, I know, it's at the alt table right now.
Yes.
And looking at not just funds, but also sweat equity is necessary. So we could even add, is it funds that you want, or do you need volunteer support? And that possibly could be something that we could add, because I know a lot of organizations are looking for that volunteer support because it's been on the decline since COVID. So, is it funds? Is it in kind? That could be added. So Lincoln, let me hash it through a few things, and I can get back to you, and I'll definitely forward it to the board, some suggestions. So I think it's really important that we are supporting our community in various ways, because having a healthy community then decreases the likelihood of negative behaviors. And that's really what our goal is. So let's take it back to the drawing board and get the form, I think, a little more clear. And then we can have it at our next meeting.
I'd just like to note that the organizations that we give to are not what I take issue with. It's the fact that we donate public funds at all. That is what I have a problem with. And you use the example of banks. So banks are private corporations, that are there to create profit, and they can do with it as they will. Obviously, it's they have a social purpose, but that's for the good of their own image, I think, is why they do that.
Well, with the PUC now, Matt, they have initiated a committee. There is a social committee, and there is a form that you fill out. So I know with some public entities, sometimes and private entities and entities such as ours. I think if we take a look at other police services boards across Ontario, they do, social action as well. So I think it's important that we do commit back to our community, because these are auction dollars that, we benefit from. And I think the greater community should have some benefit from that as well. And, I don't think that it's untoward, nor do I think that the greater community would take objection that we are using some funds to, give some assistance to some initiatives in our community that help with crime prevention, or that help build healthier neighborhoods, or that help assist people in terms of just food security and things like that. So I think there's a number of things, and I think getting, our team behind us in terms of what's a priority for our officers and civilians in this building that they would like to see supported, and what needs they see. I think it kind of, by doing this form, I think that helps bring in collaboration and buy-in from not just us, but what our officers are seeing, and what they have interest in, and what they think is important. And that's what you see at places like PUC or Community First or whatever. It's a social committee that decides on what they're going to fund and what are priorities to them. And I think that creates a good collaboration and connection in terms of both what we do here and what our officers are doing online.
That's
Rick?
not what we do though, is it? We do it at the board level.
No, but I think by having the forum out there, it gives the opportunity for other organizations to be aware of what we do and for our officers to get more involved, knowing that they can come forward as well and be communicators of that. Rick, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, just to finish the thought, I really think this is on mission for us, and that's the key. We're here for a number of things, and community is certainly at the center of all that we do. So I just would like to say that, my view is I think this is something that's on mission, and again, if you look at many of our crests, they often come from members of the service who are putting a lot of sweat equity into some of these events. And I think it's good for them to know that we support them and have their interests at heart too. So that's all I have to say on it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. Anything further? Okay, see nothing. I don't have any new business.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Nope. Okay, so our next meeting date is April the 28th. Hopefully there'll be tulips blooming and not snow
Freezing rain.
and freezing rain. Yeah, so put that in your, and we will do hybrid again for our next meeting, April 28th. For those that can come in person, that's great. And for those that want to be virtual, that's certainly welcome as well. I'm going to, it is 1:38. I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. John, Matt, all in favor? The regular meeting is adjourned and we will enter into the caucus meeting.